The pounding started at the loading dock just after 2 in the morning, and it did not stop. 40 engines idling in formation under the sodium lights of the emergency lot made the windows of St. Mercy General hum in their frames. Nadia Brandt felt it through the soles of her shoes before she heard it through the glass. She had worked the overnight shift for 9 years. She knew every sound this building made at this hour. The sigh of the HVAC, the rattle of the meal cart, the buzz of the dying fluorescent over Bay 4. This was not one of those sounds. This was leather and chrome and 40 men, who had come a long way to say something, and the night charge nurse 2 doors down had already picked up the phone to call the police. Nadia did not move toward the window. She stood very still beside the supply cabinet with a tray of saline in her hands, and she understood with a cold certainty that started in her stomach and climbed into her throat that they had come for her. She did not yet know whether that was the worst thing that had ever happened to her, or the strangest. To understand why 40 men on motorcycles surrounded a hospital at 2 in the morning, you have to go back 11 days to a quieter shift and to a man nobody expected to live. Nadia Brandt was 41 years old, and she had the kind of face people forgot the moment she left the room. She wore her brown hair pulled back so tightly it gave her a headache by the end of every shift, and she had stopped noticing the headaches years ago. Her scrubs were the cheap kind that pilled at the cuffs. She drove a Corolla with 190,000 miles on it and a check engine light she had learned to ignore. She rented a 1-bedroom apartment over a laundromat on the east side of a tired industrial town where the steel mill had closed before she was born, and nothing had ever quite replaced it. She had a daughter, Mira, who was 9, and an ex-husband who sent money when he remembered, which was rarely. Nadia worked nights because nights paid a differential, and the differential was the difference between rent and not rent. She was good at her job in a way that nobody measured and nobody rewarded. She remembered which patients were afraid of needles. She remembered which ones had nobody coming. She kept hard candy in her pocket for the diabetics who crashed at 3 in the morning, and she bought it with her own money. The man came in on a Tuesday night, 11 days before the engines, on a gurney, pushed by 2 paramedics who were talking fast and low. He had laid his motorcycle down on the highway when a pickup drifted into his lane, and the pickup had not stopped. He was unconscious. He was 63 years old, the charts would later say, though he looked carved out of something older than that. He was heavy-set and barrel-chested, well over 6 feet even lying down, with a full gray beard, matted with road grime, and a body covered in ink so old it had gone soft blue under the skin. His left forearm bore a tattoo of a snarling wolf's head over crossed pistons, and beneath it faded letters that read, Iron Covenant M.C. His leather vest had been cut off him by the paramedics, and lay folded on the foot of the gurney, and across the back of it, even folded, Nadia could see the rocker and the wolf and the word President. Nobody knew his name. He carried no wallet. The bike had been registered to a holding company that led nowhere. The hospital admitted him as a John Doe, and the trauma team worked on him for 4 hours. And when they were done, he was alive, barely, with a punctured lung and a shattered hip, and a head injury that the neurologist would not make promises about. Nadia was assigned to him on the 3rd night, when the crisis had passed, and what remained was the long, dull, expensive work of keeping a broken man breathing. She read his chart. She read the words, no identification, and no insurance, and no next of kin. And she read the running tally. The billing office had already begun to attach to his file a number that grew by thousands every single day he lay there. She did not know yet what she was going to do. She only knew that she did not like the way the day shift administrator had looked at the John Doe in Bay 4, the way you look at a stain. His name, it turned out, was Walt Cote Coe. She learned it on the fifth night when he surfaced for the first time, his one good eye swimming open in the dark, his cracked lips working. He leaned in close. "Easy," she said. "You're in a hospital. You were in an accident." "Walt!" he rasped. It cost him everything to say it. "Tell Roan." "Who's Roan?" He was already gone again, though, sliding back under, and the monitors kept their steady electronic vigil, and Nadia stood there in the dark turning the name over. Walt Roan. She wrote them on the inside of her wrist with a ballpoint pen, because she had nowhere else to write them, and she did not want to forget. She came back to Bay 4 every hour that night between her other patients, longer than the charting required. She straightened the thin blanket the trauma team had left tangled at his knees. She wet a sponge and cleaned the road grime from the corner of his mouth, careful around the stitches the surgeon had laid. She read the rest of his body, the way you read a man who cannot tell you about himself, and what she read was a life, lived hard and lived long and lived, somewhere underneath the ink and the damage, with a kind of order to it. The scars on his knuckles had healed clean, the teeth, she could see, were his own. Someone, at some point, had set this man's broken nose with care. He was not a stray. He belonged to something, and that something did not yet know where he was, and Nadia found herself hoping against every reasonable instinct that it would come looking. On the sixth night, he stayed up longer, and he watched her work with the steady, patient attention of a man cataloging a stranger. When she came to change his line, he spoke, and his voice was a low gravel rumble that seemed to come from somewhere below the bed. "You don't talk much," said. "Neither do you." Got an excuse, he nodded at the tube in his side. "What's yours?" She almost smiled. "Nights are quiet. You get out of the habit." She taped the line down. "Drink some water slow." He drank, and the effort cost him. And when he was done, he lay back and studied the ceiling and said, to the ceiling, "Somebody'll come for me. You don't have to worry. I'm one of those with nobody." A pause, the rasp catching. "I got more family than this town's got people. They just don't know yet." His eye slid to her. "When they figure it out, you'll know. Whole building'll know." She thought he was confused. She wrote it off to the head, injury, the medication, the way men reached for comfort in the dark. She was wrong about that too, but it would be days before she understood how completely. The administrator's name was Gerald Featherstone, and he was the kind of man the title of this story would have warned you about if titles told the truth. He was 52, lean and pressed, with silver hair combed into submission and a navy suit that cost more than Nadia made in a month. He had come to St. Mercy 3 years earlier from a consulting firm, and his job, as far as anyone on the floor could tell, was to make the numbers look better to the regional board that owned the hospital and for others like it. He had closed the pediatric overnight unit in his first year. He had cut the night cleaning staff in his second. He spoke in the soft, reasonable voice of a man who had never once in his life been told no by anyone who could make it stick. On the seventh night, Gerald Featherstone came down to the floor at an hour when administrators were never seen, and he stood at the foot of Bay 4, looking at Walt the way Nadia had feared he would. "This one," he said, to the night charge nurse, not bothering to lower his voice. "What's the disposition?" "He's stable, recovering slow. He's a John Doe with no coverage, running us 11,000 a day." Featherstone consulted his tablet. "The board flags these. There's a process. Medical respite, county transfer, there are facilities. He can't be moved yet. The neuro team hasn't cleared him. Then we begin the paperwork, so we're ready the moment they do. He looked up, and his eyes passed over Nadia without seeing her, the way they always did. We are not a charity. Somebody has to be the adult about the arithmetic. He left. The arithmetic stayed. Nadia stood beside the bed of a man named Walt, who had asked her to tell someone named Roan, and she felt something harden in her that she did not have a name for. She found out what she was going to do 3 nights later, and she found out, the way she found out most things, by accident, in the dark while everyone else was asleep. She had stayed late to sit with a dying woman in Bay 7 who had no family, because that was the kind of thing Nadia did and never mentioned. On her way out at dawn, she passed the billing office, and the door was open, and the day clerk had not yet arrived, and Walt's file was sitting on the counter, with a bright red flag clipped to the top. Transfer pending admin review, and below it the number. $61,000 and climbing. She thought about Mira. She thought about the rent. She thought about the check engine light. And then she thought about Walt's one good eye swimming open in the dark, and the way he had spent his last conscious breath trying to protect someone else. And she made a decision that no reasonable person who understood arithmetic would ever have made. She stood in the empty corridor outside the billing office for a long time before she moved. Through the window, the eastern sky was going the color of a bruise turning yellow at the edges. A floor buffer hummed somewhere far off. She thought about the account she kept at the credit union 3 blocks from the laundromat, the one with Mira's name on it as beneficiary. The one she added to in increments of $40 and $60 on the good months and nothing at all on the bad ones. $8,000. 6 years. She knew the balance to the cent because she checked it the way other people checked a wound, pressing on it to feel that it was still there. She had a little money. Not much. $8,000. Saved over 6 years in an account she had promised herself was for Mira's future. For the community college her daughter did not yet know she wanted to attend. $8,000 could not pay a $61,000 bill. Nadia had worked at St. Mercy long enough, though, to know how the billing system breathed. She knew that a flagged file got reviewed when the balance crossed a threshold, and that a file with a payment posted against it, any payment, a good faith payment, got reclassified as an active account, and an active account did not get the red flag, and a file without the red flag did not get walked into Gerald Featherstone's morning report. It would not save Walt. It would buy him time. It would keep him in a bed with the neuro team instead of in a van to a county respite facility 40 miles away, where the title of this story would have ended very. So Nadia Brandt, who had $8,000 to her name, and a daughter and a check engine light, walked into the billing office at dawn before the clerk arrived and used the patient kiosk, and she paid $4,000 against the account of a man she had spoken to exactly once. She did it under the only name available to a John Doe, an anonymous, good-faith contribution. She did not put her name on it. She did not want her name on it. She did it, and she went home, and she did not sleep. And the red flag came off Walt's file that morning, and Gerald Featherstone's report that day did not mention Bay 4 at all. She told herself it was a small thing. She told herself she had not really helped, only delayed. She was wrong about that in ways she could not yet imagine. For 4 days, nothing happened, and the nothing was a fragile illusion. Walt grew stronger. He surfaced longer each night. By the 9th night, he could hold a cup of water, and he knew where he was, and he remembered the accident in fragments. He still asked for Roan. Nadia still did not know who Roan was, and Walt, when she asked, only closed his eyes and said, "He'll come. He always comes." In those 4 days, a small ritual built itself between them without either of them naming it. She worked his corner of the floor first before the rounds demanded it, and he saved up the questions a man saves when he has nothing to do but lie still and think. He asked about the town, and she told him about the mill that closed and the streets that emptied. He asked if she had kids, and she said one, a girl 9, and did not say more, and he did not push. And the not pushing was its own courtesy. He told her one thing about himself on the 8th night, unprompted, the way men like Walt give up information, sideways and without weight. "Started the club in '79, he said to the dark, 11 of us. Out of a garage off the county road. We had nothing. We had each other." His hand moved on the blanket. "People think it's about the bikes. It's never about the bikes." He did not explain what it was about. He did not need to. The way he said it told her it was about exactly the kind of thing she had done at a kiosk at dawn, though she had told no one and intended to tell no one, least of all him. She did not tell Walt what she had done. She did not tell anyone. The billing system is a living thing with many eyes, though, and on the 10th day, one of those eyes belonged to a clerk who noticed something strange. An anonymous $4,000 payment posted from an internal kiosk at 5:40 in the morning against a John Doe account on a day a particular night nurse had badged out at 5:38. The clerk was not a cruel person. The clerk was simply a person who reported anomalies, because reporting anomalies was the job, and the report went up the chain, and the chain ended at a Navy suit. Gerald Featherstone read the report at his standing desk on the 11th morning with a cup of single-origin coffee cooling beside him, and he understood it instantly because understanding the mechanism of money was the only thing he had ever been good at. A nurse had gamed his system. A nurse had used her own money to hide a charity case from his review. A nurse had made his arithmetic lie to him. He did not feel anger, exactly. He felt the cold, clarifying focus of a man who has found a loose thread and intends to pull it until something unravels. He pulled the badge logs. He pulled the kiosk footage. By noon he had a name. Nadia Brandt, night shift, 9 years. No disciplinary history, which only made it worse, because a clean record was a thing you could ruin and a dirty one was already ruined. He called her in for the start of her shift that night, the 11th night, and he did not do it kindly. The administrative wing was empty and bright and smelled of carpet cleaner. Nadia sat in a chair that was lower than his, which she understood was not an accident. Featherstone laid 3 printouts on the desk between them, one by one, the way a man lays down cards he knows are winning. "The badge log," he said. "The kiosk transaction, the footage." He folded his hands. "You understand, this is misuse of hospital financial systems. You created a fraudulent payment classification to circumvent a legitimate administrative review." "I paid a man's bill," Nadia said. Her voice was steady. She had not expected it to be steady. "With my own money." "There's nothing fraudulent about a payment." "There is everything fraudulent about using an internal terminal to disguise the status of an account flagged for board review. You concealed a financial liability from the people responsible for managing it. He let that sit. Do you know what the board does with $61,000 of unrecoverable debt, Miss Brandt? They find it somewhere. They find it in a position. They find it in a salary. They find it in a night differential." His voice never rose. "That was the terrible part. You did not save that man anything. You only made yourself the cheapest place to find $61,000. She felt her knees beneath the desk begin to tremble, and she pressed her palms flat against her thighs to stop them. And she said nothing, because she did not trust her voice anymore. "I'm suspending you pending review," Featherstone said. "Effective immediately. The patient transfers tomorrow. The respite facility has a bed. I made the call myself an hour ago." He smiled, then a small, reasonable smile. "Somebody has to be the adult about the arithmetic." He did not finish the thought, but the implication hung heavy in the air, and the implication was that the arithmetic always won, and that people like Nadia were a rounding error. She walked back to the floor with her badge already deactivated, which meant the doors would not open for her, which meant a security guard had to let her in to collect the candy from her locker and the photo of Mira taped inside the door. Quote, "She had one more thing to do, and she did it because she could not stop herself. She went to Bay 4. Walt was awake. He saw her face, and he knew the way men like Walt always knew that something had gone wrong. "They're moving you tomorrow," she said. "To a county facility. It's 40 miles out. I tried to keep you here." "I'm sorry, I tried." Walt studied her for a long moment with his one good eye, and then he reached out with his good hand, slow and shaking, and he took her wrist and he turned it over, and he read the smudged ballpoint letter she had written there 11 days ago and never washed off because she kept forgetting. "Walt, Roan, you're the one," he said. His voice was a low gravel rumble, weaker than it should have been, but unmistakable. "The payment. The 4,000. That was you. It doesn't matter now. Tell me your name." When she hesitated, he squeezed her wrist, gentle and immovable. "Tell me your name, daughter Nadia," she said. "Nadia Brandt." He closed his eyes. His chest rose and fell. And then he said the only thing he could give her, which turned out to be everything. "Get me a phone." She should not have. She was suspended. The doors did not open for her. A man named Walt, with a punctured lung and a shattered hip and 40 miles of exile waiting for him at dawn, asked her for a phone, and Nadia Brandt was constitutionally incapable of telling a broken man no. She handed him hers. He dialed the number from memory. It rang twice. And then a voice answered, and Walt spoke 9 words into the phone, and the 9 words were not a request, and they were not a threat. They were simply a fact, stated the way the bedrock states itself to the river. "Roan, it's Walt. I'm alive. They're moving me." He listened. Something passed across his ruined face that might have been the ghost of a smile. "And there's a nurse," he said. "She paid my freight when nobody knew my name. They're putting her in the dirt for it." A pause. "St. Mercy General, the East Side." Another pause. "No, don't hurry. Do it right." He hung up. He handed the phone back to Nadia, and he looked at her with something she had not seen aimed at herself in a very long time, which was respect. "Go home," he said. "Sleep. Whatever they told you, you don't owe it." His eyes drifted closed. "Family. Covers family. You're family now. You just don't know it yet." She did not understand. She drove home in the Corolla with the check engine light glowing, and she did not sleep. And at 2 in the morning of the 12th day, her phone buzzed with a text from the night charge nurse who was still her friend even now, 3 words that made her sit straight up in the dark. "They're here. Come." The engines reached St. Mercy General at 1:51 in the morning, and they came the way weather comes. You heard them before you saw them. A low collective thunder rolling up the empty east side streets, growing, multiplying, until the sound was less a noise than a pressure against the chest. The night staff drifted to the windows. The security guard at the emergency entrance stood up very slowly. And then the first headlight swung into the lot, and the second, and the third, and they kept coming, a disciplined column two abreast, chrome catching the sodium light, until 40 motorcycles filled the emergency lot in perfect formation and went silent all at once. And the silence after was louder than the engines had been. The riders did not dismount immediately. They sat their bikes, 40 men in black leather cuts, with the snarling wolf's head over crossed pistons, Iron, Covenant, MC, and they waited, and the waiting was its own kind of statement. Then one man swung off the lead bike, and the others followed, and they formed up, and they walked toward the glass doors as one body, and at the front of them walked a man the others made room for without seeming to. His name was Roan. He was 48, lean and economical, where Walt was heavy, with a shaved head and a jaw like a closed door, and a single white scar running from his left ear down into the collar of his cut. The patch on his chest read Sergeant at Arms, and below it, in smaller letters, Acting President, because with Walt down, the club's authority had passed to the man Walt trusted most, and Walt trusted Roan with his life and had for 30 years. Roan did not raise his voice. Roan had never in his life needed to raise his voice. The security guard met them at the door with his hands up, palms out, more plea than barrier. "Sir, you can't. It's the middle of the night. There are patients." "We know there are patients," Rowan said. His voice was quiet and even, and it carried. "One of them is ours. We're not here for trouble. We're here for two things, and then we'll go." He looked past the guard into the bright lobby. "I want to see the man who runs this place, and I want to see the nurse." Nadia arrived 11 minutes later. She had run 3 red lights in the Corolla and parked it crooked across 2 spaces, and she came through the emergency doors out of breath, and she stopped dead, because the lobby of St. Mercy General was full of leather and gray beards and silence, 40 men standing in loose ranks, and every one of them turned to look at her when she came through the door. Roan crossed to her. The men parted for him. He stopped a respectful arm's length away, and he looked at her, this small, tired woman in a wrinkled coat thrown over pajamas. And then he did something that made the security guard's mouth fall open. He took off his cut, the most sacred thing a man like Roan owned, and he held it folded over both arms like an offering, and he inclined his head. "You're Nadia," he said. "Yes, Walt called me. Told me what you did." His scarred jaw worked once. "You used your own money for a man you didn't know when the suits wanted to throw him out with the trash." He was not a sentimental man, and the words came hard. "Where we come from, that's the whole code. The entire thing, you did it without being asked, and without anyone watching, and without putting your name on it." He looked at her steadily. "We've been looking for a reason to believe people still do that. You gave us one." She opened her mouth and found she had nothing to say. "Your family now," Rowan said. "That's not a thank you. That's a fact. You'll understand the difference by morning." It was then that the elevator opened and Gerald Featherstone stepped out. He had been called at home. He had driven in furious in a polo shirt and weekend slacks, expecting a public relations problem, a security matter, a few drunk bikers he could threaten with the police until they scattered. He had built his entire life on the certainty that money and procedure and institutional weight always won. He walked into the lobby with his phone already in his hand, already dialing, and he said the words he had said to frightened people his whole career. "This is private property. The police are on their way. You have 1 minute to clear this lobby before every one of you is arrested for trespass." Nobody moved. 40 men looked at him with 40 patient faces, and not one of them so much as shifted his weight. Rowan turned slowly to face the navy suit that was now a polo shirt. He looked Gerald Featherstone up and down once, taking his measure the way a man reads a road, and what he saw did not impress him. "You'd be the arithmetic man," Rowan said. Featherstone's certainty wobbled for the first time. "I don't know what you think you're doing here. I think I know exactly what I think." Rowan took one step closer, and Featherstone took one step back, and the whole lobby registered it, the first inch of ground given. You wanted to throw a hurt old man into a van to a facility 40 miles out because his bill made your spreadsheet ugly, and when a nurse paid out of her own pocket to keep him in a bed, you didn't say thank you, you suspended her. You told her she owed $61,000. Rowan tilted his head. "Did I get the number right?" Walt remembered the number. Walt remembers everything. The color was leaving Featherstone's face. "Those are confidential personnel and financial records. They're going to be a lot less confidential," Rowan said. "Real soon." He raised one hand, two fingers, and from the back of the formation a younger man came forward. 26, slight and pale and out of place among the bears around him, with wire-rimmed glasses and a laptop bag slung across his cut. The patch on which read OOAD, Captain, but everyone in the club called him Ledger because Ledger never forgot a number and never lost a file. Ledger set his bag on the lobby's reception counter, opened the laptop, and turned the screen so Featherstone could see it, and he began in a mild and pleasant voice to recite Gerald Marcus Featherstone. "You came to St. Mercy from Halloran Crew, consulting in the spring 3 years ago. Before that, you spent 6 years restructuring hospital systems for a private equity outfit that has been named in 14 separate wrongful death suits, 11 of which settled quietly." Ledger scrolled. "While you were here, you closed the pediatric overnight unit, citing utilization. The utilization numbers you submitted to the board don't match the numbers in the unit's own logs. The logs say the unit was at 71% capacity. Your report to the board said 38. That's not a rounding error, Mr. Featherstone. That's a manufactured justification for a closure that freed up a wing your friends at a development group have an option to lease." He looked up over his glasses. "Should I keep going?" "Because I can keep going for a while." The silence in the lobby had changed its quality entirely. It was no longer the silence of 40 waiting men. It was the silence of a man feeling the floor tilt beneath a life he had believed was bolted down. "This is illegal," Featherstone whispered. "However, you got this. This is illegal." "Most of it's public," Ledger said cheerfully. "The board minutes are public. The court filings are public. The development group's lease option is a matter of county record. You'd be amazed what people leave lying around when they're certain nobody beneath them can read." He closed the laptop. "The part that isn't public, the part where you suspended a 9-year nurse with a spotless record the same afternoon you discovered she'd embarrassed your spreadsheet. That part's going to be very public, very soon. Local press, state nursing board. The 4 other hospitals your regional board owns, whose staff would dearly love to know how the arithmetic man treats people." He smiled, and it was not unkind, which made it worse, unless. Rowan let the word hang. Then he closed the distance, and now he was close enough that Featherstone could not retreat without stumbling into the reception desk. And Rowan spoke very softly, so that only the nearest men and Nadia and the arithmetic man himself could hear. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to reinstate her tonight. Full pay, full seniority, the suspension struck from her record like it never was. You're going to find that the John Doe in Bay 4 has, on review, qualified for charity care under the hospital's own foundation, which means his bill is forgiven down to zero, which it should have been from the start, because that's what the foundation is for, and you know it. He stays in his bed until the neuro team, not you, says he can leave. And you're going to write the nurse a check for $4,000, her own money back, because she should never have had to spend it. Roan's voice dropped another notch. And then the part you'll like least. You're going to do all of it because it's right, not because of us. We're going to walk out of here and you're never going to see us again. And the only thing standing between you and everything Ledger just read, going to the press, is whether you do the decent thing when nobody with a patch is watching. Same test the nurse passed. Let's see how you do. He did not finish with a threat. He simply stepped back, and the stepping back was somehow more total than any blow, because it returned to Gerald Featherstone the one thing he had spent his whole life weaponizing, which was choice. And choice in front of a witness is a mirror, and the arithmetic man did not like what he saw in it. Featherstone looked at the laptop. E looked at the 40 silent men. He looked last at Nadia, and for the first time in 3 years, he actually saw her, saw the 9 years and the candy in her pockets, and the daughter in the photo, and the $4,000 that had been meant for a future. And whatever was left of the consultant who had never been told no by anyone who could make it stick simply collapsed inward, quietly, the way a building comes down when the right supports are cut. Reinstate her, he said to the night-charge nurse, who had crept to the edge of the lobby to watch. His voice had lost its soft, reasonable music. It was just a voice now, an ordinary, frightened man's voice. Tonight, all of it, and pull the foundation paperwork on Bay 4. He swallowed. I'll sign it in the morning. You'll sign it now, Roan said, not unkindly. We'll wait. So they waited. 40 men in leather sat down in the molded plastic chairs of a hospital lobby at 2:30 in the morning, and a frightened administrator went and woke up a billing supervisor by phone, and forms were printed and signed. And an account that had read $61,000 and climbing was zeroed out under a foundation provision that had existed the entire time and that a single decent decision could have invoked on the first day. And a suspension was struck from a record as if it had never been. And somewhere in the small machinery of the night, Nadia Brandt's badge began to work again. She did not cry. Her composure had carried her through 11 days and 40 engines, and it carried her now. When Roan handed her a folded check for $4,000 and closed her fingers around it with both of his scarred hands, though something behind her ribs that had been clenched tight for a very long time, finally let go quietly where no one could see it. Mira's college, Roan said, and she startled because she had never told him about Mira, and he saw the startle and almost smiled. Walt remembers everything. I told you. He let go of her hand. It's yours again. It was always yours. The 40 rose to leave as one body. There was no celebration, no hooping, no spinning of tires in the lot. That was not the club's way, and it was not the night's tone. They simply filed out the way they had filed in, disciplined and quiet, and the engines came back to life, 1 and 2 at a time, until the whole lot thundered, and then the formation pulled out into the dark, 2 abreast, the way they had come, and the sound of them faded down the empty East Side streets until St. Mercy General was quiet again, and only the buzz of the dying fluorescent over Bay 4 remained. Roan was the last to go. He stopped at the doors and turned back to Nadia. Walt will be down a few more weeks, he said. We'll be by. You'll see us around now. That's how it works. He pulled his cut back on, settled it on his shoulders, became again the thing he had been when he walked in. Anyone ever leans on you again? Anyone? You don't call the police. You call the number Walt called. Somebody'll be there before the arithmetic man finishes his sentence. He almost smiled again. Family covers family. Then he was gone, and the night swallowed the last engine, and Nadia stood alone in a lobby that an hour ago had been full of leather and was now just a hospital lobby at 2 in the morning, holding a check for $4,000 and a badge that worked and a thing she could not yet name. The rest of the night she worked her shift, because there were patients, and the patients did not care what had happened in the lobby. She checked on Bay 7, where the dying woman had made it through another night. She refilled the hard candy in her pocket, and just before dawn, she went to Bay 4, where Walt was awake, his one good eye finding her in the dark. "Heard it got loud out there," he rasped. "It got loud. Roan, do it right." He did it right. Walt nodded, slow, satisfied, and his eye drifted shut, and then opened again, fixing on her with the last of his strength. "You know why we came," he said. "It wasn't the money. Money's nothing. It was that you did it quiet. You did it when it cost you and nobody was looking, and you didn't want a thing for it." His chest rose and fell. "That's the rarest thing in the world, daughter, rarer than you know. We spend our whole lives looking for it, and most of us die never seeing it once." He squeezed her wrist where the ballpoint letters had finally begun to fade. "You showed it to 40 men in one night. They'll carry that till they're in the ground." Nadia sat with him until the sun came up over the tired industrial town, until the day shift arrived and the building filled with ordinary noise, and somewhere in that hour she stopped being a night nurse who would be forgotten the moment she left a room and became something else. Though she would not have put it that way, and Walt would not have either, because in their world you did not say such things, you only did them. 3 weeks later, when Walt was discharged, he walked out the front doors of St. Mercy General on his own 2 feet, with a cane, and a limp he would carry forever. And there were 40 bikes in the lot to ride beside the van that took him home, and Nadia was there too on her day off, in a wrinkled coat, small and tired and exactly. The morning of the discharge had its own small ceremony, the kind the club did not announce and did not explain. Roan came up to the floor an hour early with 2 of the men, and they waited in the hall while a physical therapist walked Walt the length of the corridor and back, and when Walt reached the door under his own power, leaning hard on the cane but upright, the men did not cheer. They simply stood, and one of them, a broad, quiet rider with a gray braid, put a folded bandana into Walt's free hand, and Walt closed his fist around it, and that was all. Before he left, he found Nadia at the nurse's station, and he stood over her the way a weathered old building stands over a doorway, and he set something on the counter in front of her. It was a small pin worn smooth, a Wolf said no bigger than a thumbnail. "That's not a patch," he said. "You don't get a patch. You didn't earn it the way we earn it, and you wouldn't want what comes with it." His eye held hers. "That one's mine, though. Had it since '79. It means when you call, it's me you're calling, or whoever's standing where I stood." He tapped it once with a thick finger. "Keep it somewhere. You'll see it on the bad days." Then he was gone down the corridor, slow and upright, and Nadia held the pin in her closed hand until the metal went warm. Gerald Featherstone resigned that same month. The official statement cited personal reasons. The pediatric overnight unit reopened in the fall, with night cleaning staff restored, and a small brass plaque went up by its door that said it had been funded by an anonymous foundation, which was true, and which Ledger had arranged, and which nobody questioned, And on slow nights, now when the building hums its familiar hums and the dying fluorescent over Bay 4 still has not been fixed, Nadia Brandt keeps a phone number in her pocket beside the hard candy, written in ballpoint on a scrap of paper, a number she has never had to call. Pinned to the inside of her locker, beside the photo of Mira, there is a small worn wolf's head no bigger than a thumbnail, and she touches it some nights on her way out, the way you touch a door frame leaving a house you grew up in. She likes knowing. It is there. She likes the weight of it. She thinks about the night the engines came, and how she stood very still beside the supply cabinet, certain it was the worst thing that had ever happened to her. And how wrong she had been, how completely and wonderfully wrong. If this story moved you, if you believe the quiet kindnesses still matter, the ones done when nobody is watching and nobody will ever know, then stay a moment with that feeling before you go, and let it remind you to be the one who pays the freight when no one is looking. Thank you for listening. If stories of loyalty and unexpected family stay with you, leave a word below and ride safe out there.